right. Well, we will go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone, to This Is How I Teach. We have our presenter today, Dr. Trent Ingvers, which is going to talk about interactive online activities. We were going to have a second presenter today. Unfortunately, she is stuck in Virginia. Her flight was canceled due to bad weather that must have went through last night. She was going to fly in this morning, and then her flight got canceled again. So, fortunately, Veronica is unable to be with us today. So we have, as Dr. Ingvers put it, the Trent Show. So thank you for coming today. We have a couple of online participants too. We have Laura online, right, Laura?
Yes, I'm here.
All right, and we also have Jara online.
Yes, I'm here.
Hi, and then is there another one online?
No, that's it.
It says Bonnie, but
okay.
We're in the social work department.
Okay. So thank you all for coming, and without further ado, I'll pass it on over to Trent.
Thank you very much. So I promise you, since we had a cancellation, I will not fill the time. I'm not going to expand my presentation like I do whenever I don't have enough for class to make it fill the amount of time. I'm going to keep it to what I had planned, but then this will mean we'll have some good time for questions and answers at the end. And so let me provide a little context, a little introduction. Just click. So I have been teaching in the university setting since 2002, but am a relatively recent newcomer to online education. I taught my first class 3 or 4 years ago, and I will tell you that I was a skeptic. I thought there is no way that this is going to work, largely because the thing that I like most about teaching is the relationships. And I couldn't believe that I could develop significant relationships in an online environment. And so my first foray into teaching was actually for Notre Dame. They have a graduate program in nonprofit management. And they had asked me to teach a leadership course online synchronously. And I thought, this is perfect. This is exactly what I want to do, because I can have that face-to-face interaction. I can have that live conversational experience. I can do the group activities that I've been doing in class. We'll just all be in different places. And it was, for all practical purposes, a disaster. I hated it. It didn't feel live, even though it was live. You know, using the same types of activities in that environment just didn't work in the same ways that they worked in the classroom. And so I began teaching for the Indiana University School of Public Environmental Affairs. Again, it's a graduate program, but they have an asynchronous format, and it went much better. I'm actually almost a believer now that this can actually work, and the reason why I think my first attempt at teaching online and my first attempt at doing applied activities, group activities online was such a catastrophe was because I was trying to take my classroom and cram it into my computer rather than saying, what's the format and what works in this format and how can I make the most of resources that I don't have in the classroom for this type of experience. And so I want to talk to you about a course that I have prepared. Full disclosure, I have not taught this class. And so this was a class that I developed online in an 8-week format through the online course development program. It's a political science class, but it's cross-listed with professional studies. And so it was designed in an 8-week format, but I'm going to be teaching it for the first time this fall in a 16-week. So we'll actually see how this goes. Now, I said that. Now, since that time, I've now developed 3 undergraduate courses online. I haven't taught any of them, but we'll see how that works. Now, you know, I said that my goal in this was to not take my classroom and shove it into a computer. But yet there's something about the way that I teach that I wanted to carry over. And so I thought I'd just take a couple of minutes talking about my face-to-face classrooms and what those look like and how I've then taken that and translated it into the online environment. So if you look at the courses that I teach, I've taught 7 or 8 different courses, 9 courses here since I came to USI, and they largely fit into 3 categories. So the first are my graduate courses. And so these are once a week courses, 2 hours and 45-minute courses. And for any course, it doesn't really matter what it is. It has a rhythm. And the rhythm is the first third of the class is spent in seminar. We circle the chairs. We talk about the readings. It's very student-driven. The second third is content delivery. That usually involves some sort of facilitated discussion / lecture. And the last third is an applied activity where I give them an opportunity to take the content to make meaning of it in a professional setting. This is a professional program. The second category of classes is what I would call my undergraduate research courses. So this is a research design class and a statistics class. And these are the more vocational of the undergraduate classes that I teach. And in these classes, I am still doing the same amount of problem-based teaching, but I've segmented it differently. So rather than doing part of a class, I'm using the whole course. So I'm doing content delivery, activity for a full course. Content delivery, activity. And so I have a nice long hour and 15-minute chunk to do these problem-based activities. And then there are my undergraduate theory courses. There's things like public personnel administration, human resources, organizational behavior, public administration. And these I split the class about 50-50, about half content delivery and discussion and half applied activity. And so hopefully that this signals to you that these types of group activities are fundamental in the way that I think about teaching and student learning. I'm not going to spend too much time on theory, but I'm going to point to a couple of theories that have been particularly influential in the way that I think about teaching broadly and specifically with regard to online. The Kolb learning model has been very influential. I believe this really reflects the way that I believe students learn more than anything else, that students observe something in the environment, they think about it, they try it out, and then the cycle begins again. Right? So creating opportunities in the classroom for students to have experiences, for them to test knowledge is an important part of what I do. I'm throwing this in because I went, Larissa's already heard this, I went to a great conference on online teaching last week, and I saw a man named Curt Bonk speak. He was exceptional. I felt like I learned so much. I came back invigorated, ready to try new things in my online classroom. And he presents this, he has a couple of different models that he uses. I'm a Star Wars fan, and so the R2-D2 analogy really resonated with me. But you'll see in many ways it mirrors some of the things that Kolb is talking about. Students read, they reflect, they display, and they do, right? That there needs to be opportunities for application. And that in my online environment, these group activities are the way that occurs. So let's get to the course. The course is Political Science 363. It's public and nonprofit organizational behavior. It is an organizational behavior class, not unlike what you would find in the business school, but with recognizing that there's some unique characteristics of the public and nonprofit sector. And so we cover topics like culture, structure, motivation, work dynamics, work attitudes, groups and teams, communication, power, ethics, and organizations. Your standard buffet of organizational behavior topics. In terms of the course, I set up the course with a number of content delivery options. I have a self-produced introductory video, helps orient them to the course, helps them figure out the navigation of the website, lets them know about me. The content delivery is a mixture of two things. One is reading, the second is videos. If you look at the videos, they're about 50-50. 50 self-produced videos and 50 videos that I have described as kind of a best of YouTube, things that I've found online that display that demonstrate the concepts in a very clear, focused way, much as I would in the classroom. So I figured, why reinvent the wheel? And so I do rely on a fair amount of canned content. In terms of assessment, there are 4 major assessment opportunities. The first is what I describe as their imagination organization. This is a semester-long project in which they're creating their own public or nonprofit organization. So they start by identifying a public goal that they want to achieve. They develop a structure that would be appropriate for an organization that would meet that goal. They talk about how they shape the culture of that organization. They make decisions about staffing. I'm basically walking them through the process of applying the course concepts to an organization in which they would like to run or they would like to run. And so it's set up so that there are deliverables throughout the semester. Then they redo the work and submit it as a final project that is an organization of their creation. The second opportunity for assessment is there are 3 or 4 case studies throughout the course. And these are representative of in some sense, modules. Yeah, so the first case, I don't remember if there's 3 or 4. In the first case, it covers the first third of the class. So they're supposed to take the concepts of that class, look at a real-life case, and use those concepts to evaluate, make recommendations for management in that case, and so on for each third or each quarter of the class. There's a small assignment called the organizational evaluation. And this is what I do in lieu of final exam. And that is I ask the students to think of themselves as consultants and to say, if you were going to go into an organization, what would you be looking for? What do you see as the characteristics of effective structure? How do you evaluate the structure? What are the appropriate scope of groups and teams? What does the group size look like? How do you evaluate the functionality of these groups? And they basically come up with a checklist that they create where they attempt to look at every topic in the course and to say, these are what I've identified as the best practices. If I was going into an organization, these are the things that I'm looking for. And so I do that in place of a final exam. But the real meat and potatoes, and the thing that I want to spend the rest of my time talking about today, is the problem-based activities. These are group activities that take place over the course of the semester that correspond to each covered topic. So I'm going to kind of jump over here just for a second and show you the course navigation page. So you can see I've structured it around assignments. There's a tab for each one of the assignments, and then when you click on the problem-based activities, you'll see you'll see the 6 main topics that we'll cover over the course of the semester. And in each one of these topics, you will find a group activity. Okay, so I am going to move through these through a slideshow, through the slideshow. Some of the print is a little small, but we can go back over and look at them in the discussion board when we get done if you want to look at them in more depth. So the first assignment is an assignment that's looking at the topic of structure. I manage the assignment through a discussion board. So each group will have its own discussion board in which to do the work of the group. The students will receive an individual grade. So each student will be evaluated independently, but that grade is based on 2 things. And I can show each, there's a rubric that corresponds to this. Basically, half of their grade is based on their individual performance in the activity, and half of the grade is determined by their group in that activity. So they have some responsibility to ensure the quality of their output in addition to whatever their individual contributions. For this activity, the learning goals of the activity are to describe the structure of an organization, evaluate the structure, and explain the effects of organizational choice. And for this activity, what I asked them to do, this is an activity that was actually developed by NASA. I'm sorry, the National Security Administration. And it looks at how the NSA engages in its work. So I give them an actual flow chart of the organization. They read a section about how the NSA is organized. And then they have to make recommendations. And so each student over the first half of the week looks at the structure, makes suggestions, asks questions. They may engage in some of their own independent research on the NSA and the work that it does. And they're generating ideas. In the second half of the week, they are then, as a group, debating these ideas, trying to come some sort of conclusion about what structural changes they believe will have the most impact in reforming the NSA. So the NSA is an organization that has historically had a lot of challenges around communication and accountability. And so this gets them to look at how the formal structure of the organization may influence some of those problems and how the structure could be reformed in order to address those problems. Second activity. The second activity is actually developed in 3 stages. So if you can't see under the header, it says problem-based activity 2, MBTI. So I have the students take the Myers-Briggs type indicator to try and get an indication of, it's not a personality test, but typology. And then they have to learn about their typology and post it to a discussion. And so that has to happen in the first third of however long the unit's open. In the 8-week class, it's open for 1 week. So based on the first 2 days, they have to learn about their typology and post it. And then after that occurs, I will assign them to groups based on their typology, where ensuring that there is a wide representation of the typology in that group. And then I give them an activity. This activity is an activity that was developed by NASA. We moved from the NSA to NASA this time. It's basically a survival activity.
Desert survival?
It's like desert, it's moon survival.
Okay.
So you've crashed on the moon, and you have these 18 items that you have to use to get across the moon. And it's fun, right? Yeah, there's a lot of joy in the room just hearing about this. But ultimately, I mean, if you think about your own classes, the problem doesn't matter at all. What matters is that they have a task before them. And so I ask them to come to a conclusion about what they would be, which the items they would say, what's necessary for their survival. And I'll give them the answer, but ultimately I don't really care what their answer is.
It's the mirror.
It's the group process that matters. Right? So they're engaging in a group process. And I'm watching, are they active in this group process? And then the third step of this is that then they have to be reflective about the process. So each individual student then produces a final submission. So they have a group submission about what are they going to say, what are they going to use to save themselves. And then they have an individual response that is their reflection on the group process. That is, this is how, based on who I am as a person, I operated in this group. This is what I see as the advantages of the things that I did. These are things that I could have done better, and I can see that they were foretold by my typology. And this is my reaction to the other people in my group. So it's becoming aware of the human element in groups and how that affects the behavior of organizations. So you can kind of connect this to the learning objectives, right? Self-awareness of personal typology, evaluations of the positives and negatives of decision-making, and becoming a reflective. And this is what it looks like. I'll tell you, out of all the activities, this is the one that I'm most nervous about doing in the 8-week format. I think it will be challenging to do all of this in 1 week. 16 weeks, I'll probably span it over 10 to 14 days. But I think there is some time sensitivity to this.
So can I just back up?
Sure.
So the actual decision making, like I get to the mirror, that's all that's done discussion board and change that way?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. And the point that might be inherent in that question is it's not synchronous. And so it involves frequent visits to the discussion board. If you're taking an 8-week course and this decision has to be made, I'm expecting that on any particular day, I'd probably give them closer to 48. But yes, you can't log on once. You are logging on 3 or 4 times each day for a 2 or 3 day period.
So do you tell them that up front?
Well, I haven't taught the class yet.
But I mean,
I'll tell you what. In the other courses that I have taught online that are asynchronous, I have very clear expectations about what is what constitutes discussion board activity. And I have a document that I use to outline that. And there's 2 sections. One section is about quantity of contributions, and the other is about quality of contributions. And so for quantity of contributions, there are 2 parts there are 2 things that I make clear. One is that there's a minimum number of posts, right? So whether it's 4 or 8 or 10, that this is how many posts that I'm requiring. but also that it can't be one and done. So with my graduate students that I teach online, I tell them that they have to have a post within the first 3 days. And so that that it's not something I check off my list, but it is in fact a true discussion board. It's not a way that I submit my assignment. It's a way that I engage in conversation. And just as though you and I couldn't have a conversation that occurs in an instant of time, it must unfold, and I have to communicate the same expectations.
It can't all be done at 11.
It can't all, 11, you can't finish it on 11:59 on Sunday night, where I report the due.
Do you require them to respond to others or start a new thread?
In my graduate course, I asked them to, the discussion boards are more structured. So I have, these are the 10 things that I want you to talk about. And each 10 thing has a thread. And so one of the advantages of logging on early in the week is you can start the thread. But they don't have to start a thread. They can just tag onto another person's thread. But their post must be quality. And I have 4 parameters of what it takes to be a quality post. And if they don't meet one of those parameters, then it doesn't count towards their 6 posts. So at the end of the week, I go back through and I sort them by name, and then I say, Joe posted 6 times, but only 3 of those 6 posts were quality posts, so he gets a 7 out of 10.
So going back to this group, do they only communicate through the discussion board?
Yeah, it's all through the discussion.
Right. I didn't know if you gave them the option to communicate like through wiki or.
I haven't. Well, I haven't taught the class yet, but we'll see. This could be a colossal failure, and then we'll tackle that, right? Then we'll figure out what might be a more effective strategy.
Many things. I don't know. Maybe we can talk about it, but interesting.
It will be. I really believe that this will be a class that will involve significant expectation setting, and really trying to communicate that.
I mean, I just didn't know if you gave them the option.
I think my gut inclination is I would like to keep it consistent. I think from an evaluation standpoint, it's everybody does a wiki, or everybody does a discussion board, or everybody does a voice thread. But I'd like to keep it consistent. I think that just from a practicality standpoint makes it easier to
And
administer.
I think too, that way you can go in and see what they're doing. If you give them the option, even just by email, you have no idea what they're saying to each other.
Which is part of the issue with that I am, as I said, again, they get an individual grade that is based on their individual and group outcomes. And so I'm not only interested in the deliverable, I'm interested in the process. And so paying attention, needing to have whatever the assessment mechanism is, needing it to be such that I can observe the process as it unfolds.
Right.
One of the more telling things that and let me preface this by saying I'm a firm, and I think the way I teach reflects it, I'm a firm believer in student-driven learning. I think that in any particular classroom, students bring a wealth of experiences if they're able to articulate them to that classroom environment. So that said, when I was getting ready to teach my first online asynchronous class, I had a conversation with one of the students who was in the program. And I said, and actually we actually got together for breakfast, and we were all sitting together. And I said, tell me about the worst online experience you've had. I think this, at the very least, I could be better than the worst, right? It gives me a threshold by which to pass. And they said, consistently, they had courses over time, and I shouldn't say consistently, but here, this wasn't an isolated attendance, that the main mechanism of participation was the discussion board, but that the faculty voice was largely absent from that. And so I do participate in the discussion. Often it's to help them prioritize. Often it's to raise questions that I think provoke thought, rather than being a person that's kind of lecturing through the online format, but I am active, and so it's important to me that whatever tool it is, that if I see them going off the tracks, that I can enter into that world and be a part of that. Let's see. Oh, okay. So motivation. Well, I don't want to rush us ahead. I'm happy to take questions as we. Motivation. Okay. So we're now back in the same groups that they were in for the first activity. And it's facilitated through the discussion board, again, an individual grade based on both individual and group outcomes. Goals of this assignment are to demonstrate knowledge of theories of motivation, to take those theories and link it to practice. And this is something that I'd really learned having taught this class several times in the classroom, is if I ask students to articulate to me Maslow's hierarchy of needs or expectancy theory, they can do that. But if I ask them, how would you manage people differently now that you know that theory? There is no comprehension that has practical implications. And so that this linking those theories to practical administrative processes has been really, really important to me. And then evaluating motivational strategies and making decisions about which strategies are effective in different situations. And so the prompt for this activity is, for many, many years, the bane of my existence was the Department of Motor Vehicles. And in Indiana, it's gotten better, but having moved here most recently from Illinois, I'll tell you, it was not a very positive experience. Right? There was an old television show about a guy that caught souls that escaped from hell, and the portal to hell was the Bureau of Motor, the DMV. And so I think a lot of people have had this experience. And so I set up the prompt that people hate going to the DMV. You don't go to the DMV for positive reasons. You go because you have to pass some sort of test, or because you need to have an unflattering picture taken, or because you have to pay a fine, or and consequently, the people that work at the DMV are equally unhappy to see you as you are to see them. And so to ask students to take those theories of motivation and to say, how would you intervene in this public sector organization to improve its function? And so this now kind of goes back to a very similar model to the first activity, which is individual contribution and then decision. So we spend in the beginning people proposing ideas, and I give them some constraints, right? So the idea that you propose must be grounded in a course topic. So you can't just say, I want to pay them. Right? You have to say, why you think paying them more will increase their motivation.
You just need a big box of puppies.
Just a big pop, make people happy. There's puppies at the DMV, and of course people will be happy, or they'll kick the puppies.
Yeah.
Sad outcome. Wish I've not gone there. Was that a very dark? And so, because a lot of people don't like the DMV, and so they're forced to think about the theory in an applied sense. But then there's a judgment, right? So as a group, they have to come up with their top 5. They have to prioritize all of the recommendations that come from the group and say, we believe these are the 5 most high impact organizations. And they know that part of their grade is my evaluation of their organization, of those priorities. And I give them some constraints, right? So I get them to think that recognize that the public sector and the nonprofit sector, finance is often a constraint, right? So you can't just say, we're going to give people bonuses for, you have to figure out a way to make that practical, which really, I think, drives them towards thinking about not only compensatory, but non-compensatory forms of motivation. And then they're evaluating these on those elements. And I even give them some guidance. So I say, think about financial incentives. Think about job design. How do you structure people's work? Think about the cultural and situational variables at work here and how you might change them to make a more pleasant work life, whether it's puppies or something else. Right? So to really get them to think holistically. Communication. I have not yet done this, and I'm just so excited. This is one of those that I struggled with what to come up with, and and I thought about it, and I came up with this, and I thought it sounded incredibly fun to me. We'll see if they find it fun or not. And the prompt for this activity is this. BuzzFeed cites George Washington's favorite book as Cato, a Tragedy by Joseph Addison. So I tell them George Washington's favorite. And the prompt is, what is George Washington's second favorite book? And the reason that I like this question is because it is unanswerable. There is no documentation in the historical record about what George Washington's second favorite book is. So it's an unanswerable question. And this activity, this communication activity, as you see, learning outcomes, evaluate the mediums of communication, select effective mediums of communication for specific organizational tasks, is to think about the way in which people communicate, the mediums of communication, whether I talk to you on the phone, whether I send you an email, whether we engage in a video conference, whether I send you a fax. And so their assignment, their individual assignment, is to engage in information seeking using at least 4 different communication mediums. So they can call someone on the phone, they can go have a meeting with someone, they can send a telegraph, right? They could, it doesn't really, I don't have a, yeah, I'm sure that's the answer to the question that they would ask. The medium of communication is not as important to me as the fact that they use a variety. And so as each member of the group engages in information seeking through a variety of techniques, they come to be able to evaluate the suitability of that medium for the task that they're undertaking. In this case, the task is information seeking. And so the deliverables for this activity are both an answer to the question, what is George Washington's second favorite book? But like the other activities, I'm less interested in that deliverable, and I'm more interested in the process. So for each medium that they use, they have to evaluate it. What are the advantages of this medium? What are the disadvantages of the medium? And then as a group, they are coming up with advice for organizations. In what types of situations would you use this medium? What organizational tasks is this appropriate? And when is it not appropriate? I'm sure that many of us in dealing with students have come to experience the fact that they are not good consumers of how you communicate to people, right? That you get, emails that are very serious, that you think this would much be better, this would better be in person. Or they are, not doing things in a timely way because of the medium of communication that they're using. So whatever the strategy is. So really kind of forcing them. So again, there's an individual outcome and groups and teams. This activity is somewhat different in the sense that it is very unstructured. So one of the things that I was somewhat intentional about in the design of this course is a level of scaffolding in terms of student ability. And so the first problem-based activities that the students do throughout the semester are very structured. Right? I try and give them, this is exactly what I'm looking for, this is how you go about doing it, this is what the delivery will be. And as the semester progresses, they become a little bit more complex. The outcome becomes a little bit more ambiguous. And that is certainly true for this one. So the learning outcome is to evaluate group performance and making improvements for making recommendations for improving performance. And the design of the activity is very loosely structured. And that is, tell me about your group. You've now worked with these people in 3 other groups. You've interacted them with repeatedly. You know some of them in some depth, some of them in a lot of depth, some of them in less. But tell me about how your groups reflect on your group process thus far. And I do give them a little guidance. I want them to talk about formation, to apply the Tuckman stages of forming, storming, norming, and forming. I ask them about communication. We look at at teamwork, and they've done a bunch of readings and watched some videos on these topics. But to evaluate their group in terms of context, composition, and process. and then that's the deliverable. How does your group, along with recommendations. And these recommendations can be retrospective or prescriptive, right? So they can say things like, I wish we would have done this. It gives them a sense of, if you're starting a new group, what's a good practice to use at the beginning in order to increase the functioning? Or, is that Donald? Sounded like my child. Yes, it is. That's my wife's laugh. There should be a mute button up at the top that you can click. Though I am very happy to have you here. Hello, hi Donald. Have you gone into labor yet? My wife's due imminently, so I was a little worried I wasn't going to be able to.
Muted, so you're not
She just muted. And so the context, composition, process, or prescriptive recommendations. What will they do in the future to help their group better? And then just to think about these things in terms of organization. Oh, this is my favorite activity. I have a lot of favorites, but this is my favorite activity. This is an activity that I've done in the classroom many times, and it always produces such great discussion that I wanted to figure out some way to do this in the online environment. I think Laura's on here, so she and I went back and forth on this 10 times trying to figure out how to do this. So let me tell you about how I do it in the classroom. In the classroom, I collect money from the students at the start of the semester. So I tell the students, you need to bring me 5 $1 bills. And every student brings me 5 $1 bills. And so if I have a class of 30 students, I have 150 $1 bills. And then we use it, I keep it in my, I usually keep it at home because I want to keep it in my desk. Otherwise, so I keep it at home until it's time for this class. And I bring it in and I give them, and I structure them into groups. So there's a small group that's a high power group. These are the senior managers of an organization. There's a medium-sized group that is the middle managers. And the middle managers take orders from the senior managers. They can't go to the managers, they just wait for the managers to tell them. And the managers and the middle managers give orders to the lowest group, which is the largest group, about what to do. And as a class, they have to decide how are they going to spend this money. I sit the $150 down on the desk. I say, here's $150. This is your money that you gave to me at the start of the semester. What are you going to do with it? And I've had, over the semesters, I've had them do all kinds of different stuff. They threw themselves a pizza party. They went out to a movie one time. They gave it to charity. My favorite semester, one time they gave me a bribe to give them extra credit points. And they didn't get that extra credit points. And I think I ended up giving money to charity. But that through this, they mimic these power dynamics that exist in organizations. And so the way that we ended up deciding to structure this in the online environment is with extra credit points. So I say to the high power group, you have 50 extra credit points that you can allocate to everyone else in the class. You can give them to yourself. You can give them to the people in the smallest group, that you can distribute them evenly. You can distribute them based on efforts. They are your points to distribute across the class. In the grand scheme of things, it's not enough points to really make a difference in anyone's grade, but they don't pay attention to that. They just pay attention to that. They can earn all of these extra credits. And then I give them a task. And in this case, the task that we ended up using is to create an annotated bibliography of public administration articles and texts. So each student is going out and finding an article or reading something or reading a book review, and they're coming back with a citation and information on that. So they're actually learning about public administration through this process of doing this activity. And they're structured in 3 separate discussion boards. So there's the high power people, and they can go into any discussion board they want. The middle people can go into their discussion board or the discussion board below them. And the discussion board below them, they just sit there waiting for people to tell them what to do. But what happens in the classroom, and I'm hoping will happen in the online environment, is that you see people engaging in power dynamics, right? So they're saying, "You're my friend. Will you go get 3 citations for us to add to our bibliography. Oh, and that's the one other thing, is the number of points to allocate is based on how good I judge their bibliography. So if they do a really good job, they get more points to allocate. And so I think of that as a relational form of power. Or bribery, right? They say, if you do this, I'll give you more extra credit. And so the students are asked to engage in organizational-like dynamics in order to earn these points, but through the process, and in the end, they have to reflect on that process and with an individual submission to examine, what are the different types of power that I saw used? What are the different strategies and tactics that people use to manifest those types of power within this online environment? So it's a little bit more of a complicated design, and you see that in the discussion board. So I end up building these discussion boards separate discussion boards where they're assigned to these groups, and then at the end there's a discussion board where everyone has to contribute, has to post their individual contribution that's a reflection on the group. So even if they're not active, they still have to go back in and read all of the activity in order to make an evaluation of the dynamics.
How do you decide who's in what group?
I don't know.
Is MBTI or?
I would probably toss a coin.
Right.
I probably would decide. Do you have any recommendations?
Well, use MBTI.
I have that, and I would have that information.
How many students are in class?
I would expect that we will have 20, 25 students. So if you say, let's just for mathematical sake, if we've got that's 10% in the top group. So that's 2 people in the top group, 6 people in the middle group, and then 12 people in the bottom. Whether this will work in an online environment is yet to be determined. Ask me back next semester. I'll talk about see how it worked. But this was the design.
So with the discussion, so people in group 2, could they still look to see what people want to talk about?
They can look. They can't contribute.
Oh, they can look. Okay.
They can look. Anybody can look at anybody's group, but they can't post it.
Oh, that's what I didn't know if there was a feature. I didn't know if we have to view certain things so they can't even see.
No, I'm just going to give them all wide aspect. Because at the very least, when they write their summary, I want them to see how it unfolds. I want them to be thinking about how that works. In the classroom, when I do it spatially. I divide the groups up spatially across the room, and they just move to talk to each other. But then at the end, we debrief. Each group talks about the nature of their conversation.
Worth a try.
We'll see. Like I said, I still definitely consider myself a novice at this, but I am increasingly hopeful that there's some effective learning outcomes that are associated with this.
So you talked about grouping for that second project, and you haven't really considered the final project. Are you just going to randomly group them to the other 3 projects?
There's a significant literature on the forming of student groups, and I feel like I would like to dive into that literature a little bit more before I answer that question. My guess is that I will not randomly assign them, that I will strategically assign them. But how I'm going to do that, I haven't decided yet.
I mean, I guess open question for everyone. How do you
assign groups?
Well, I know you said one of your assignments is sort of like look self-reflecting on performance. So you'd have to have at least a couple of different experiences and cycles of tasks and relationships in order to do that. So you've got
right. At that point, they would have been in the same group for 3 separate activities.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, when I do it in a 16-week, I may add another activity in there to help increase that.
One thing I would just say, because I'm in the middle of, I'm up to my ears, an online course for adults, is, for example, for motivation, another question you might ask is, how is motivation working where you work? Because, again, most of our students work.
Right.
In other words, they've already been swimming in that environment, and they could reflect on how are you managed? What's this management profile? What's the motivation kind of process work? I'm always trying to find ways to get adults to be aware of their own environment and apply that to topics. So that's sort of, and as I said, not when you be adults, because
in general,
most
yeah.
of our students do something.
And I think that's,
whatever.
and so when, what I said, I make a distinction between quantity and quality.
Mm-hmm.
And when I talk about quality posts, and I really try and hit this home at the beginning of the semester, that for me, a quality post does one of four things. So one, it directly cites the reading and applies it, or it brings in supplemental information. And this is one of the things that I really liked about the online format is I find students going out, doing supplemental reading, and then bringing the link back into the discussion. Or three, there expresses disagreement with the viewpoints of someone else. Or four, and this is the point with adult learners, brings in your own professional experience to provide a different slant. And so to really spend some time at the beginning of the semester legitimizing that is real knowledge and valuable for what I consider to be quality participation.
You mentioned looking at that they bring in additional knowledge of, your wound survival thing, and some of those folks will be online looking for the answer because that's accessible.
Yeah.
So, I don't know.
Yeah, that's a good point. I don't know if
when you have them just sitting there in a circle, in the classroom, they can't do that. But when they're at the computers and accessing
they're probably having a side conversation that I don't even know about where they've gone out and done this.
Oh yeah.
But then the thing that I think I'll need to communicate to them is that their grade isn't based on their survival, right? Whether they come up with the right, that doesn't matter to me. So if you see a group that's not, they come to a resolution really fast. Well, let's talk about why that may not be a particularly effective strategy. I mean, the advantage of group, and I'm not a believer that groups necessarily produce optimal decisions relative to individuals. There's a vast literature on the advantages and disadvantages of that. But that when we do find groups producing more optimal decisions, it's when there is greater assent, when there's a longer period of debate.
I was going to say, again, having witnessed and observed this many times, I could see in the online environment that introvert just withdrawing from the discussion, going over here, finding the answer back. And so we'll see.
And it doesn't even have to be the introvert, just the person that's got to get the right answer.
Yeah. Right. Or that, yes.
And be determined not to discuss anything.
But they wouldn't. Yeah, they would not feel like they want to jump in and they just.
I think that's hard for the students in the classroom as well.
Yes.
There's just people that don't feel comfortable participating,
right.
And when you're evaluating them on participation, and I am not particularly apologetic. I'm trying to be sensitive to that perspective, but also to have the conversation with them that hopefully someday they gainfully employ, and that that this is a marketable skill.
Right. Just gotta advocate their own opinions.
Have you thought about, because ideally you mentioned the same group for the first project, the third, fourth.
The first, third, and
Okay. What if there's one person that just doesn't participate in the first one? They kick people out of the groups, or
survivor style.
yeah, it's off the island. I mean, just brainstorming. I know since there's an individual grade attached to it, surely that would motivate them enough to be part of the group. I just didn't know if you thought about that or how to plan.
I haven't, other than the fact that that's potentially why there's an individual grade.
Right.
But do you have any strategies, any thoughts, or?
I'll know to anybody.
Or this is
Well, I mean, maybe the broader question that I kind of came up with is this a self-selected online course? They're selecting out of classroom experience, because they don't want to judge, they don't want to interact, they don't, they're self-selecting. I mean, maybe not.
Yeah.
We don't have that choices, here, classes like that. But I mean, I agree. It seems like you set up every kind of motivation you can for them to participate and engage.
I was just, you know,
It's
Yeah,
points.
I don't think I'll have any idea until I do it.
Right.
And then I'll figure out where all the mistakes are and have to go around for a round 2.
Well, and this is it's good for the rest of the team to say, you had someone that didn't participate, then what do? Because that's real life too. They don't participate. They don't buy in. They're not. So.
I mean, I'll tell you, in my face-to-face environment, I do let them kick out members, but there is a chain of a procedural chain, and it starts with them having a conversation with that person. They can't kick them out until they've talked to them, and then they notify me, and then I talk to them, and then if the group is still complaining, then we all meet together and talk. And then if it still doesn't materialize, and because there's all these procedural hurdles, it doesn't happen that often. I mean, I can think of 1, maybe 2 times that it has happened.
And that person just said, I literally don't like group work, or what
yeah,
was it?
they said I've got too much going on, or
Oh.
you know,
Okay.
and
College.
you know, and the conclusion was that they would do the entire assignment by themselves.
Yeah, that they would ask for.
I mean, and I let them.
Yeah.
In this case, and I think when they were done, they wish they would have had a group to help divide the responsibility up. But
well, because I know, and Laura maybe can help remind me, we had a faculty member talk about how she separated her class into 2 groups, and they did discussions. They like competed for like a prize at the end.
I have seen that before.
Yeah.
Yeah, Laura.
Yeah, it was Linda Bailey.
Yeah, Linda Bailey, where they like competed for the golden brain, and like the team that got the golden brains at the end got like extra 50 credit points, like kind of the same thing, where that they could kick members out. It was kind of I forget what her procedure was, but it was really well thought out. You know, what if you get someone who doesn't do? And so I'm trying to remember what it was. So I just didn't know if you had a plan or an idea or just
Yeah, we'll wait and
we'll
see.
wait and see. Yeah.
I'd be interested in reading what she sends out to the students about that. Are we able to get that?
Yeah, Laura, do you still remember, like her description?
I don't know. I'll have to look. Yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
It was like, yeah, because how she had her discussions, they discussed the same thing, but it was just based off of like had a better, like more in-depth discussion.
Yeah.
And and then it was like every week pulled up to whoever team won the gold brain, and then like, 3 weeks in, if you feel like your group wasn't just me, you could break off and join your own group, like, or you could kick people out into like Mountcast group. I'm trying to remember what the details were, but
Yeah. Well, I mean, the competition was throughout the entire class.
right,
It wasn't like until the end.
right,
That they get.
to encourage more in-depth conversation about that. As I said, she called it the golden frame, something I think, but something along those lines I've seen happen to group work. An interesting take on like a common discussion was it like, but I really like how you grouped everyone up into different personality types. It's a really interesting way to figure out why or where.
Try and force some of that
Yeah.
interaction.